So I was browsing around Twitter the other day and I saw something that really bothered me. A tweet stating, "Destiny isn't Destiny without PvP." This isn't the tweet that bothered me, but rather the replies I read under it. One of them read, "I disagree. I think PvP has not added anything to the game since The Taken King. I would not care if it was removed to give us a more fun PvE experience, and they work on a PvP side game." I then went to this person's profile where they had Borderlands pictures everywhere, which shows that this person has interest in PvE games. This is a perfect example of PvE only players who don't enjoy PvP but want to control the whole game by giving feedback in areas of the game that they don't even play. This is something that was way too near and dear to me because I feel the Division has the same exact problem. These are my thoughts of the current state of PvP in the Division 2. Before I get into this, I consider myself someone who enjoys both. I love PvE and I also love PvP. In the Division 1, I loved going into the Dark Zone because it fed my passion for PvP and PvE all in the same area. I couldn't get enough of it. Although there were a lot of mistakes made with how the game was balanced, I still ended up clocking a few thousand hours, most of which were in the Dark Zone. The Dark Zone in the Division 2 just doesn't have the same feeling as it did in the first game. There have been tons of improvements over the first game, such as better loot pools, dynamic landmarks that move when you clear them, a bigger variety of spawn points, and a huge reduction of cheaters. And by reduction, I mean I haven't come across one yet. But there is one feeling that I just can't shake. That feeling being that the first game's Dark Zone left such a bad taste in some people's mouths that they rather sabotage what's left of it, even if they don't plan on going to it themselves. A PvE Dark Zone was always suggested in the first game, however, this idea was always brushed off because this would have taken the gut out of what makes the Dark Zone so special. The possibility that players could be lurking around any corner waiting to pounce and steal your loot, the possibility of losing your loot allows the developers to give better rewards in the Dark Zone. However, this has mostly been taken away because a large amount of the dropped loot in the DZ is non-contaminated, which basically means you don't have to extract it. This just means that there is less loot flowing in the DZ, thus having less tension to secure your newly found loot. The reason this was added was to give people in the DZ the feeling of more progression. But I feel like this is already done through the hundreds of rewards you get for clearing landmarks and leveling up in the Dark Zone. But the contaminated loot is the least of the Dark Zone's problems. The Dark Zone has been split up into 3 different locations. All of these locations have different map layouts, and one out of those 3 will be considered occupied. This zone changes every 48 hours or so between the 3. The occupied Dark Zone is meant to be the most hardcore zone out of them all, rendering the best rewards in the game. However, it doesn't feel like this. The loot feels the same, if not worse, than in the normalized Dark Zones. Of course, you get more contaminated loot, which is meant to try to give you an upgrade by the way the stats roll. But this just means way more things to extract with a bag limit of only 5. Also, the risk is insane considering how fast the time to kill is in the raw Dark Zone that has no normalized stats or toned down talents, so some builds can just put you down in about a half a second. The NPCs are also a lot stronger as well, which makes it feel almost impossible as a solo or a duo team. Not to mention when you die, you lose an entire DZ rank. Once you die a few times in a row to another player, you'll see yourself drop fast. I was doing a lot of PvP with people who knew me from my stream, and we all dropped close to 15 DZ ranks in about 10 minutes, meaning that we would have to get back up to level 50 to start earning caches again. This is causing people to not want to go to the occupied Dark Zone, so most of the players end up in the 2 zones that are normalized. These 2 zones feel like PvE Dark Zones because of all the debuffs, punishments, and timers that rogue players get. Every time I go into the normalized DZ, there are just a ton of players farming together. There's no reason for them to kill each other because most of the loot is non-contaminated and they don't get much for surviving as rogue or even manhunt. We went on like a 25-minute manhunt and received 250 gear score gear and purples. The The problem I have with the normalized Dark Zone is that they just don't feel like that lawless environment that they promised and gave us from the first game. It feels more like the Discovery Zone where everyone needs to be nice to each other, share the bouncy bounce, and be put in timeout when you're naughty. The proximity voice even gets cut off when you go rogue. I'm assuming this has to do with the Division having a toxicity problem, but I feel like this game is rated mature and people should be able to make their own decisions. And if they're sad that people on the internet are being mean to them, they should go and turn VoIP off in the options. Let me give you a breakdown of all the punishments and debuffs you get when you want to steal another player's loot. First, you must toggle rogue to let everyone in the area know that you are currently going to want to kill them. This requires you to stand still for 2 seconds and puts a huge logo over your head to show everyone in the area where you are. Since Pulse has been nerfed so much from the first game, it's almost impossible to know where people are in the area around you. This means as a rogue squad, you are going completely blind and have no strategical advantage of knowing where people are in the area. So everyone immediately gets to see you, but you don't get to see them. Leveling up your Dark Zone tree in the base of Ops can help this a bit because it kind of hides your logo until you disavow. But once you get that first kill, you're pretty much vulnerable to everyone in the area. When going rogue, you are basically shrinking the already small Dark Zones by about 30%, considering all the checkpoints and all the areas around the checkpoints are now currently off limits since the shock turrets will literally kill you in one shot. Here is a clip from one of my streams that showed me being shocked from over a train up the street on top of a car. The turrets were placed to keep people from spawn camping the checkpoints, but I feel like they've already fixed this problem by letting you spawn at any of the checkpoints in the DZ. There are like 6 checkpoints and a safe house that you can spawn at. So even though these turrets are meant to stop spawn campers, all they do is cut off major pathways for manhunts to get to where they need to get rid of their manhunt status and retrieve their rewards. So basically, if your team goes manhunt, you need to go to one of the 3 stations to stand there and press buttons for like 20 seconds. A lot of these manhunt stations actually get placed fairly close to checkpoints as well, which basically narrows down your available paths to get there. I know in the Division 1 there was a huge problem with manhunts just running away, but man, they really didn't give people enough room to breathe. I'm not 100% sure if this is true, but I swear you also run slower when you're a manhunt as well. At least it feels like you do. With all these debuffs, if you do actually get killed, which is pretty common considering players even with green gear can melt you thanks to the overly aggressive normalization, you are put in timeout for 60 whole seconds. A whole minute of having to watch your lifeless body on the ground. But that's not all. When you get back out of the checkpoint to regroup, you have another cooldown before you can go rogue again. This means if you lost your loot and they are extracting it, you have to sit there and watch. It also means that if your teammates are still alive from the battle, you can't help them. The best you can do is just body block and hope for the best until the rogue cooldown is gone. Once the rogue cooldown is gone, it then allows you to sync up with your group, which takes even more time. Oh, I forgot to mention, if you're on a manhunt and you kill a player, you have to stand on their loot in the open for like 2 seconds and hold the steal loot button. Because yes, I would like to secure your already limited loot on the ground for you when I just murdered your whole squad. What you are seeing is an incredibly taxing and brutal Dark Zone that is forcing people to not PvP without actually removing the PvP from the game. At least that's how I feel anyways. I understand that in the lore of the game you are doing something wrong, but this feature of going rogue and stealing other people's loot is what was marketed when showing the Dark Zone. It's what made it so special. I decided to ask my viewers when I was streaming on why they think that this type of overtaxing, punishing environment is good for the game. I got responses like, not everyone has time to grind for gear, and sometimes people don't want to lose their stuff to other players. My response to this was, there's a way to do that. Don't go into the Dark Zone. The open world in the Division 2 is quite possibly one of the best open worlds I've ever seen. It has dynamic events, random encounters, hundreds of different roaming bosses, 18 main story missions with multiple different difficulties, countless and replayable side missions, daily events, strongholds, and soon to be raids. All of these events can give you the best gear in the game and at a pretty fast rate without losing anything. So if you don't want the possibility of losing your gear, there are tons of different options around the game to do just that. But if you also expect the DZ to be primarily PvE, then you are just asking for a PvE only game and pushing PvPers to Conflict. Conflict is an organized PvP where it's 4v4 on dedicated maps. I appreciate this mode, but this isn't why I play the Division. I play the Division for the open world PvP/PvE and all the crazy stories that come with it. With all these flaws, I still think the DZ can be saved. Not that I know better than anyone else or that I even know what can be done to fix, but these are some suggestions that went through my mind. Before we get into some of the major changes, I really want to talk about normalization, how it works, and why it's in the game. Normalization is a system made to give people a more balanced PvP experience. It's made to try and close the gap between someone who has 10 hours played and someone who has 100 hours played. Although I think this system is 100% necessary in dedicated PvP modes such as Conflict, where it is objective-based 4v4, I really don't like the idea of it in any of the Dark Zones. The reason is because the Dark Zone was always the endgame goal. It was always looked at as that endgame activity that was meant to test the best of the best. If you didn't have a good build, you could try and sneak in there to gear up and hope the big dogs don't come for you. Basically a way to skip a lot of the grinding in the open world, hence the term high risk, high reward. The Dark Zone should be a place to go when you think you got what it takes to hang with the stronger players. Right now, you don't need a decent build at all. Everyone feels basically the same thanks to normalization, which then further hurts any strive to actually improve your build. You're basically improving it just for the sake of improving it, not because you want a better build to help you get through that lawless environment we all knew and loved. Well, at least some of us. Remember, the Dark Zone isn't for everyone, and it should stop being balanced to try to suit everyone's needs. I think normalization should be kept for Conflict and the level 1 through 30 experience while people are learning the game. At endgame, level 30, normalization should be completely turned off in the Dark Zone. Players have more than enough time to learn how to make a decent build by endgame. Not only that, loot reigns so much in the endgame that it barely matters at all. I've even come across some players in the ODZ where there is no normalization at all, and they still pack a punch even with lower grade weapons and less optimized builds. There is no reason for handholding in the most hardcore area of the game when players have 50 plus hours in it. So I would say this: remove normalizations from all builds, but keep the PvP normalization of talents to make sure builds don't get too far out of hand. An example of this would be toning down Strained from 200% crit damage down to 100% crit damage like it does now. So basically what I'm saying is don't touch base damage, armor, or health. Then I would add the rogue system back to the occupied Dark Zone, but keep out the need to toggle rogue. Have it be like Rogue 1.0 in the Division 1 without the white rogue status. Then have the Manhunt go up to like level 30 or more to give some amazing Manhunt stories and streaks. Oh, and some insane rewards. One idea I thought of would be this really rare mask that you could only get if you went on a 30 kill Manhunt. A mask with a Manhunt symbol on the front of the visor. The only difference between the occupied DZ and the regular DZs should be the rogue system and how hard the NPCs are. That's it. Nothing else. Right now, the ODZ and the normalized DZs are so different that I actually think it splits the community. I think they should all be pretty much the same, but one a little more hardcore than the others. With that being said, let's talk about the size of the Dark Zones next. I think they need to start expanding the Dark Zones. There is room for DZ West and East to be expanded north. We need larger areas that we can explore so we don't feel locked in such a confined space. This will not only give rogues and manhunts room to breathe, but also give people who want to just farm and avoid PvP more room to avoid them. I would like to see the player count increased as well, because I think coming across the same 12 people can get a bit dull. I miss being able to go up north and see a whole different amount of people. The dark zones aren't populated on PC in my region enough to jump around the different DZs. One might be full and the other two might be completely dead. So if I'm in a server and I see I'm in a full server, I want to stay there without seeing the same two teams over and over again. Remove the rogue cooldown altogether. It's an incredibly frustrating feature that I think was made to keep people from boosting in the dark zone. I think the boosting situation just needs to be handled just like cheating is, and punish those people who are doing it. The rogue cooldown just slows the game and makes it not as fun. I would greatly decrease the range of the turrets. The checkpoint turrets are fine at the door, but keep them at the door. Don't allow them to hit you across 2 streets and block major routes that rogues need to use. If you are rogue, you should be able to just pick things up by hitting F. You shouldn't need to hold down Z to confirm that you want to steal their loot. They need to also remove or at least greatly decrease all non-contaminated loot from the dark zone. If they want to buff what you get from landmarks, that's fine. But the idea of secured loot always dropping in the dark zone is kind of lame and greatly lessens the raw part of the DZ. Most of the loot drops from the DZ should be contaminated and should need to be extracted. This also means upping our bag sizes to like 9 instead of 5. Not sure why they lowered it so much. I'm assuming it had something to do with needing less space because of all the non-contaminated drops. The NPC damage needs to be lowered, and I also think that the amount of NPCs need to be toned down. The main threat in the DZ should be other players, not NPCs. I think if you want hardcore PvE encounters, they should be exclusive to the landmarks and events. But yesterday, I saw literally waves upon waves of NPCs just pouring into the streets at a random crossroads. No landmark in sight. We were PvPing and we were getting constantly shot in the back by hordes of NPCs that were spawning out of a door. I understand wanting to add more NPCs through the world, but with how small the DZ is and how limited you are, a lot of times you have no choice but to just run by them and get melted. I also think it'd be nice if they remove the speed debuff and the fuzziness that you see on screen as a manhunt, and make sure the manhunt stations aren't right next to spawn points. And one of the biggest things of all, the rewards. There needs to be better rewards in the dark zone. We need rare items that drop in the dark zone to give you that feeling of excitement, but also that gut-wrenching feeling when it comes to trying to get that item out safely. I could even suggest a new rarity called the God Roll, where it's got a gold and white beam. That means the stats on the gun are basically maxed for that world tier. Maybe this is an incredibly rare thing to see, maybe 1 in 500 chance or something. The bottom line is we need more exciting loot in the DZ that makes people want to go there. There needs to be incentive to go to the dark zone. Now that we've talked about the dark zone structure, let's talk about the PvP itself. The PvP in the Division has a lot of improvements over the first game. However, the time to kill is so fast that it feels like there is no respect for builds. I really think armor needs to be respected a bit more, but we also have to remember that skill power isn't working as intended at the moment. Once skill power gets fixed, we may see an increase in time to kill. You might see new healer builds pop up, etc. So I think it's important that this is tested beforehand in a PTS, but as the PvP stands right now, it could use a bit of a slower time to kill. I really don't think we should go anywhere close to where it was in Div 1, but I really feel like I should only melt someone if your build is made like that. Right now, with the normalization, it feels like any build can melt anyone at any given time. This type of time to kill should be saved for conflict where it is organized PvP that has no PvE. The overpowered NPCs getting involved in every fight makes the time to kill feel even shorter than it is now. So I would suggest just buffing armor a bit to give people who want to build tank an actual viable strategy. Right now, if you build tank, you still get shredded instantly. DPS should counter tanks and tanks should counter DPS. Only when a DPS player is shooting another DPS player should the time to kill be as fast as it currently is. The faster time to kill is great, but when you get that feeling that you can do it with whatever build you want, it kind of takes away the feeling of accomplishment that you put a good build together. What's funny is that I think the PvP isn't even that bad. It's a bit slower and more tactical, but it's all the other factors that we talked about that makes it truly unenjoyable at times. Overall, I think we are seeing a complete flip of what we saw in the Division 1. In the Division 1, we had an awesome Dark Zone that outshined everything else in the game. Now we have the opposite effect. I really hope the developers are doing their best to get the DZ back on track, because the Dark Zone experience is truly one of a kind, and I don't want to see it go. There's a reason we're not seeing some of the big streamers getting on or some viral videos on YouTube. It's because the Dark Zone isn't making any noise at the moment. It's kind of just there. What's there is beautiful, but without reason to go to it, the magic is gone. I have a lot of trust in the developers at Red Storm, and I know they will make the right decisions. But I don't know how many of these decisions came from other studios or if they were entirely their own. But it really feels like they are trying to make a zone that was always hardcore and soften it up to make it easier to get into. I would suggest a PvE mode that turns PvP off and allows people to explore the DZ without actually getting any of the loot. Basically just a training mode that allows you to learn spawns, extractions, etc., but the loot just gets deleted when you extract it. Escape from Tarkov does something similar, and I think it works well. I can already see the comments now. This video may get a lot of hate because I know the Dark Zone is a touchy subject, but as a longtime fan of the DZ, I couldn't stay quiet on this subject. I had to give my opinion. If you guys enjoyed the video or appreciate it, be sure to drop the video a like. Thanks for watching.
All right, guys, you ready?
Dark Zone?
Yep. I just got a mask upgrade. I want to try it out in there and get us some good loot.
Sweet. Let's do it.
Remember, when we get in there, it might not be just us.
Transmissions jammed. Proximity coverage only. Backup activated. System rebooted.
Attention. Risk of infection severely elevated beyond.
Keep a lookout, guys. I'm gonna call it in.
Okay, got you covered.
We're all clear. Let's extract.
Initiating extraction.
Okay, we got 90 seconds. Keep your eyes peeled, everyone.
Do you see anything?
No, I can't help thinking what these guys have.
What, their loot?
Yeah, what do you think they got? Alright, there it is. Get ready.
Let's get the goods out of here.
On target.
No, but seriously, should we take their loot?
These guys?
Yeah.
There's 3 of us and 2 of them.
Well, we got 60 seconds. I say we do it.
Ryan, you game? All right, here comes the sticky. On my mark.
Now go, shoot, shoot, shoot!
Rogue protocol initiated.
Get Zoe on the left there.
Alright, I got her.
Careful.
I'm running low on health.
Look out.
Alert. Friendly division agent is down.
I'm down.
Ryan, can you help him out? I'm looting Zoe.
Let's go, revive it, man. 15 seconds.
Ryan, what are you waiting for?
Dude, clock's ticking. Let's go, go, go. Come on.
Are you leaving the...
Hostile agent neutralized.
DZ's made just for me. The place where I can really cut loose. It's all here.
Jump and tumble here? I don't think so.